Hello, good evening, and welcome to our Friday night live. You are all welcome to join us, and our regular attendants, those who tune in regularly, those who are occasionally with us, and even for those who are here with us for the first time, you are very welcome as we come to look into a topic which we believe is very important at the moment and very current, and namely the strategies to look after our mental health during this lockdown and beyond. So we hope you will enjoy the program. And to assist me with this tonight, I have a great expert panel of three great friends of mine here who are here going to help us. First of all, I'd like to introduce to you Sylvia. Sylvia, one, is a great friend of mine. She's been with us for about 5-6 years now with Casey, the SDA Church Group. And 4 of those years, she's been serving as our health director and passionate about health and how to help people in the community. She's employed in that area. She's working, supporting people in the community and looking at especially the 65 plus and with the homeless situation and going through difficult time, and very well versed in this area. And also has been trained and qualified now to run what we call Depression and Anxiety Recovery Program by Dr. Neil Nedley. The CHIP program, she's a great facilitator over the years. And Forgive to Live, to name a few of those programs that she has been involved over the years. And so is very well versed with the community needs and issues there. The other one, so welcome, Sylvia. Glad to have you on board.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you. Welcome. Look forward for your contribution. And our next guest tonight is Andrew. Andrew Jasper is a pastor and director of the health ministry for the Victorian Conference, and is also a very passionate one on health issues. He's been involved over the years conducting and training people to deliver some of those programs I mentioned earlier, and delivering them personally himself. And he's going to share with us some of his experience. He was trained, he's been at Loma Linda University and training to delivering some of those health program, community-based health program as well. So welcome, Andrew. Glad to have you on board with us. Thank you.
Good to be here.
Look forward to your contribution too. And last but not least is Dr. Horatio. Dr. Horatio is a trainee consultant psychiatrist at one of our major Melbourne hospital network. And he comes with the expertise, Dr. Horatio. He comes with a lot of the technical expertise and the mental health with the latest information, up-to-date information in regard to mental health. And he will guide us in our discussion this evening. So welcome, Horatio. Nice to have you with us. Thank you for coming on board.
Thank you, Alan. You flourished a bit my story. I'm a senior registrar, not a consultant psychiatrist, but hopefully soon.
Senior registrar.
And unfortunately, I didn't go to Loma Linda either. It's all right.
It doesn't matter.
I almost stood up more tall on that one.
Nice to have you with us. Anyway, we're looking forward for a great discussion. We've got about an hour, and I'm sure the time will fly off as we go into this. So my first thing, mental health. We're talking about mental health here. What is mental health? And it's been in the media, in the news a lot recently. What is it when we talk about mental health? We generally talk about health issues, and we know mental health specifically. And I just want to share with you what the World Health Organization described mental health. It says a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. It's a very comprehensive definition here. And we could spend the whole hour just dissecting this definition and looking at every aspect of this here tonight. But, what is, and cope with normal stresses of life, for example. What is normal? you know, and when does it become abnormal? So that alone is quite something we can work productively and fruitfully. You know, at the moment, especially with the lockdown, a lot of people are unable to work at all. Period. You know, and so how do we define and what is there and is able to make a contribution? We know that all these aspects are very important aspects for a normal person functioning, and we need. And from here, we see that the environment that we are in right now inhibits a lot of those performance, a lot of those aspects. You know, will put a brakes, if you want, on this. You know, we are not able to be productive, and we're not able to contribute to the extent that we want to. We are being in isolation. People are being locked down, and all kind of different things that will interfere. So, how prevalent is it, therefore, mental health? Maybe I can ask here, Dr. Horacio, maybe you can help us with some of the statistics. You are right on the front line there with mental health. What is the prevalence of mental health, and how bad is it?
Well, I can tell you first, baseline from what we know is that 45% of Australians will develop mental illness. So almost 1 in 2 will battle mental illness sometime during his lifetime, and about 1 in 5 battle mental illness every year, with anxiety disorder being the number one, substance use disorder number 2, probably, and depression number 3. To be honest, I don't have exact stats of how much COVID has increased these percentages, but from my clinical work, we've never had to sustain such a high intensity and high load. Basically, our inpatient units are full, running at capacity all the time. So we can definitely see that quite often during the lockdown, the level goes down because people don't go out and asking for help. The moment the lockdown lifts, hospitals are full, everybody's out, decompensated, struggling, needs help. So yeah, we've been running at capacity since last year, pretty much, with these fluctuations.
Yeah. I think you mentioned about the latest maybe update with the impact of the thing. I think Andrew has some figures there, some information on that area. Do you there? Can you help us there, Andrew?
Yeah, let me just share my screen here. Thank you, Elaine. Is that showing up? Is that showing through?
Not just yet. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's coming up now. Yeah.
Yeah. So look, it's an iceberg in the making that we've got here, these restrictions and what they're doing to our mental health. And just recently, I downloaded the newest Australian Institute of Health and Welfare report. This was updated as soon as 20th of July, 2021. And just this graph alone is very telling. You can see the lighter colored line is the 2019 mental health services by week of processing. So each week from January 2019 through to April. So this does not include the current Delta outbreaks that we're seeing in several of our states at the current point. But you can see that even in 2019, we had the lighter line there. In 2020, like Horatio said, we had a decrease there in March and April. That's when the lockdown occurred, the first one. But then we have that steady increase. And then you can see there is really a proportionate increase by August all the way through to December. December is typically a lower time. People are on holidays. And sure enough, in 2020, we were opening up not only our state after our restrictions here in Victoria, but other states were opened up, and there was a lot of traveling, a lot of goodwill until the end of December. And 2021, you see a fairly high jump there in January, which is normally a modest time. But then you can see now in February, March, a little bit of a drop there in April because things were opening up again. But you're seeing that February and March. I'll be eager to see the line on 2021 continue as those stats become available for May through to our current situation. But yeah, those are some startling indicators that there has been a lot more mental health services provided incrementally during these last few years, these last year and a half.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing this with us there. So obviously we can see the what is happening around us is having a direct impact, a direct correlation on the figures and things there, and the up and down, and the lockdown when people are being restricted and locked in, and we can see that it's not showing the admission figures or something, but that's because people are being isolated and have no option and are struggling inside indoors. And yeah. Anybody else want to come in there to comment on this? Sylvia, yeah.
I just wanted to add as well, as we sort of look at the mental health and you spoke about the WHO's norm, we go through, especially for Victoria, you go through so many lockdowns now. So, that pattern of that norm of what Andrew you were sharing, it fluctuates up and down and up and down, and people start building up, I suppose, some sense, some people, resilience towards all this, but some people have that also prolonged, but when you look at where, I'm actually in ACT, and ACT hasn't had a case for over a year. We're now in lockdown. So you see that pattern is quite different, because that's not a norm here. So that there is no sense of that build up or that resilience or that knowing how to respond or to react, and it's quite interesting actually when you look at the community front on ACT, where, and I'm not putting a blanket because we've only just had one day of lockdown, but when you look at that community front and how people actually react to that kind of lockdown, opposed to maybe places like Victoria that has had 6 lockdowns. That's also very different.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's obvious here that the environment has a direct impact on our mental health. Yeah, the environment that we're living in, the things surrounding us will have an impact, and positive or negative. And obviously, presently, with the various stresses, apart from what we call normal stresses, there are additional stresses being imposed on the society at the moment, and creating a lot of mental health stresses and problems. And the government realizes this. The authorities is aware of this, and they're putting out a lot more resources in to support the community due to this, and this extra stress, if you want, an extra burden on the society. So how is the pandemic itself? What are the elements of the pandemic and the lockdown that will make situation worse for us? Horacio, yeah?
I guess the biggest factor is the social isolation, and we know how important our social life is, how important our social needs are, and we're designed by God to be social human beings, and we're all struggling. I guess extroverts probably more so than introverts, probably women more than men, because women get more of their feeling of achievement from social relationships, from family, versus we guys are more achievement driven. So I think there are definitely a certain class of our society that are struggling more. But I think social isolation is the big one. Then we have increase of social media. People are staying at home. What can I do? I'm just going to spend time on my computer or my laptop. And we know there's a clear association between the amount of time you spend on social media and depression. There was a study that showed that after you spend over 3 hours per day with social media, you're at a much higher risk of developing depression or anxiety. And then we have all the consequences of the lockdown: losing jobs, financial strain, maladaptive coping. People start drinking, using drugs, and then with the associated factor of increase in domestic violence. And that's where I was reading some statistics from Spain last year, when everybody was kind of really worried about what's going to happen, because you usually with bushfires, after big drama, increase in substance use, increase in domestic violence afterwards. Same thing we noticed in this pandemic. It wasn't just the fact that people were drinking more, but also the fact that everybody was kind of constrained within the same confines of the home. Quite often, if there was any pre-existing tension between husband and wife, now both stuck at home, conflict build. I remember reading a some statistics from Spain that after just 1 month, after 1 month of lockdown, domestic violence went up by 25%. After 2 years, you can imagine what's happening in our society when it comes to domestic violence. So there are a lot of factors that kind of build up to create this complex picture we have today.
Because this lockdown forces people to stay within a confined space for extended period of time, where before they would be able to escape into their occupation, going to work and spending quite a few hours outside and engaging, interacting with others. Now suddenly they are confronted with the same individual over a period of time in a very close space and environment there, and it creates, as you said, if there is already pre-existing tension in that relationship, it just makes it worse. Yes, Sylvia.
I wanted to also add that, aside from that, you may actually still have your employment, but your employment, if it's done, like through a Zoom kind of a thing, there is a whole element of that human connection that's actually missing. I'm in Canberra by myself. It took me quite a while to adjust. I think I'm still adjusting, living here, being removed from the family and being removed from my main church, but when on top of it, when you sort of put a lockdown in it, and you're alone, even though you have employment and even though you have opportunity to actually connect with people via online, it's not the same kind of connection that there's no in-depth, that kind of a connection, still surface.
And as Dr. Horash mentioned earlier, we're created, we're designed to be social being. We need the interaction. The old saying, "No man is an island of himself." And we need that interactions, that engagement, and this is not helping when we are completely cut off from our normal, usual environment and meeting colleagues and discussion and things like that. So this is, yes, Andrew, you wanted to
just on that, Elaine, too. During these lockdowns, we saw a huge uptake in the services for Lifeline, Kids Helpline, somewhere up around 15 to 20% beyond Blue. So while we couldn't connect with one another very well, people were attempting to connect more readily with these services. And in Victoria, those were Australian percentages. Obviously, the August through to September time period in 2020, when Victoria was in that very extended lockdown, and most of those figures were from Victoria. We had a 41.6% increase in August in 2020 over 2019 calls to Lifeline. Kids Helpline almost up 60%, and Beyond Blue was up 75% for that month of August. And that was just at the beginning of that 3.5 month lockdown. So what we've got now, though, is a very different dynamic, I think, in that, basically, and I mean this with all due respect to what's going on here in Victoria, but if somebody's going to sneeze, we're going to go into lockdown. It's just so touchy right now. Like Sylvia mentioned, one case in Canberra, okay, it turned to 4, but one case in Canberra, states down, locked down. And I think this whole issue of, man, when's 70% going to come, of this vaccination number, if that's going to be the real panacea.
80%.
It's just this ongoing sense of, all right. And, and so this uncertainty, I heard it in my colleagues in a meeting we had recently. It's like you plan this and then this happens and you've got to have like 3 or 4 different options now. It's just overloaded, knowing that 2 or 3 of those are going to get shoved out. And so it's all this work for very little output. And I appreciated what Horatio said about, some of us are more driven by accomplishment. And yet for some of us still employed, thank the Lord, we've got a job, but the work environment, like Sylvia was saying, that accomplishment is kind of getting redefined. How do you measure that when your previous metrics aren't working anymore?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I also just add, we can't actually also measure how much people tend to lose hope when they've actually planned things and it gets shifted. You think about a couple, having a marriage or wedding date set, and it's shifted and shifted and shifted. Think about the tension and the stresses that it actually puts on an individual. So I was thinking about what you were saying, Andrew. You know, you have to have 3 or 4 different options to any plan, and sometimes all 4 might not even eventuate.
That's right.
You know,
That's right.
people have booked flights, they've actually taken. So these are all stresses that actually adds on to the individual, and it's that loss of hope. It's like, will I ever get out of this? Will I ever get on a flight and get away from this? Or, you know, that kind of a thing. I think it's really, it really adds on the stress.
That's right. The uncertainty of it all.
Absolutely.
You can't plan ahead very far at all. You can't plan very much at all. And everything is, I mean, I'm personally, I know we've been planning some of our graduation, some of our different programs and plans. And every time it's been lockdown comes in and we've had to cancel the whole thing again, postpone it, not knowing when we can have it, when we can do. So a lot of those different, and people are going, like you say, serious thing, weddings and, you know, great events that they've planned for and they've spent and made bookings for long, and then suddenly have to be canceled and not happening.
One of the ones I just heard about, this last lockdown was children who were born last year in lockdown, so they're newborns. Okay, so family can't be there, and now their 1-year birthday, family can't be there. And I was just like, oh, well, we had these lockdowns now in the 2 sides of the years, and it's like, the parents are just like, all right, but it's the disappointment level, and that may seem small to some people, but obviously those of us with kids, could you imagine having nobody around for the birth and then nobody around for the first birthday?
That's right. It's very painful. Yes, and Roger,
Just wanted to comment on something that somebody posted in our chat room, Katrina, about this culture of alcohol in Australia. I'm originally from Romania, but I lived in Canada before coming here. In Canada, even though we're part of the Commonwealth, we didn't really have this problem with alcohol. But Australia, alcohol is like a national sport, unfortunately. And it's in all the circles. All the doctors drink, all the nurses drink, a lot of them smoke. A lot of Australians drink, and it's kind of an accepted evil kind of thing. And we know that alcohol is one of the biggest depressants. So a lot of people kill themselves because they're intoxicated or become clinically depressed because of abusing alcohol. So alcohol just kind of pour gasoline on the fire for people who use alcohol.
Absolutely.
You know, on that score, Horatio, this last year, and I've just seen Katrina post on Facebook as well, that a lot of loved ones can't even visit their dying loved ones, whether it's for the funeral or those last hours. I actually lost 2 siblings last year, one in November and one in February, a brother and a sister. And they're all in the United States, so obviously I couldn't attend the funerals. But one of those was my brother Tom, and his son joined us on a Zoom memorial service. And he was finding it very difficult coping with the loss of his dad. And he was, to use Horatio's word, he was very intoxicated on the day. So people are really coping sometimes with very unhealthful ways and strategies to cope. And I think that's where we can provide a lot of hope that there are things that depressed, anxious, bipolar people can do, practical things, simple things that can make a big difference in raising resilience and kind of that comeback for people and increase that hope so it's not so dark.
Thank you, Andrew. I'd like to bring Horatio back here. So we've talked about all the impact of that this situation we're in, the environment we're in right now, is having on our mental health, and plenty of examples here, very clearly. What are the obviously we're all going through this, but not everybody's developing mental health issues straight away. So what are the clinical indications? How can we spot when things are really seriously going wrong and needed some help? And how do we identify those? Can you help us there, Horatio, maybe?
Yeah, well, we know that it's usually a gradual build-up. First of all, we talk about vulnerability. Some of us are more vulnerable than others.
Yeah.
And usually in mental health, we talk about biopsychosocial factors and also cultural and also spiritual factors. But even if you think about kind of mainstream mental health, about biopsychosocial factors, we have genetic loading. If you have a lot of family members that have depression, anxiety, we're much more vulnerable. If there's a family history of substance use, we're much more prone to drink or use substances as well. So we have this buildup of vulnerability that we cannot control, and then this combines with the
changes
stress.
in behavior, maybe changes in the behavior pattern, the drinking more than they were normally or whatever.
Yeah. So basically, it's this combination of what we inherited that we cannot control, and then what the environment throws at us. And we all have, there's kind of this point of no return. Once we get to the tip, once we're pushed by all this factor kind of push us over, then we start going down and we decompensate into struggle. And usually we go to, once we approach that kind of threshold of point of no return, let's say, usually there are what we call early warning signs, which is kind of a key term in mental health. We can usually tell that people are a bit more frustrated than usually. They lose their patience. We talk about poor frustration tolerance. So things that usually we could cope easily now really push our buttons and we lose it. We get loud, we raise our voice, we verbally abuse other family members, kind of thing. So
that's right.
So poor frustration tolerance, being more stressed, more anxious, irritability, and then not sleeping well, you're more agitated. We talked about initial insomnia and anxiety. You struggle to fall asleep. You just lie in bed and you keep thinking, worrying, how am I going to get to this event? I lost somebody. How am I going to travel? You worry a lot. And these are kind of the early warning signs. And in that stage, if we intervene and implement some of the resilience factors that we'll probably talk later on tonight, then you can go back to your baseline or close to your baseline, your normal functioning. But if you don't, and if you keep pushing up, you go beyond this, let's say, burnout. In professional terms, we call it burnout.
Breaking point.
Breaking point. Then once we pass through that, that's when we reach what we call clinical condition, like become clinically depressed, develop an anxiety disorder or other things. And that's when you need a professional help. That's when just lifestyle modification and kind of self-help might be beyond, might not be enough to help you recover.
So anybody wants to contribute? So obviously there are some telltales, signs and symptoms, we call it in clinical setting, but some indication that things are not going well for us. And when we see those little pointers, we need to not wait, as Dr. Horacio mentioned, wait until we reach the breaking point, but way before that. There are some things we can do. There are certain things we can take control of, we can rectify, we can adjust to make sure we don't get to that breaking point where it doesn't have to become a clinical problem where we need professional intervention. And maybe I can invite Andrew here. He is expert in the lifestyle issues, there. What are some of those things maybe you can share with us, Andrew, in terms of lifestyle that we can improve our ability to cope with those excessive amount of stress that we're dealing with?
Yeah, look, just to add on to what Horacio just said about these symptoms, sometimes these symptoms we're dealing with, we may not notice them ourselves. And it can be really important that we have a trusted someone else, whether it's a friend or partner or something of this nature. They might be able to see differences. Our pace slowing down, our attention not so great. Maybe we're getting irritated or frustrated or even aggravated and angry a lot easier. We may not see it. So getting that that other person's perspective may be very helpful. But look, there are scores of things people can do to attempt, even in the isolated area that we're in, this restriction of 5 kilometers, etc. It's very interesting to me that the one of the things we can get out and do is to exercise. And I guess exercise hits a lot of different points. It's not just the movement of our body, but it's the movement of our body. And the only way to really exercise the heart is to move the large limbed muscles, the arms and the legs. So once that heart rate's getting up, you're really pumping the oxygen. Oxygen is the fuel of your blood. It's what keeps your brain awake and alive and you very active. Now we need those nutrients as well from our foods. You mentioned earlier, that Dr. Nedley he's a physician from the United States who piloted and championed this course, the Depression and Anxiety Recovery Program. This was back in the years just after the Twin Towers came down in 2001. So this program has really helped a lot of people put some parameters around what they can do. And for a depressed person, even for an anxious person, the fact that there's something they might be able to actually do to contribute to raising their mood more consistently is really liberating. One of the folks that came through our program was her entire adult life. She was suicidal for like 16 years, attempted 6 different times. She came through the program here in Victoria, and it just revolutionized her life. She devoured the material. There's a component of CBT or talk therapy. It's done as a self-help modality within our program. But for those that need additional help in that, there are some great psychologists and psychiatrists that can also help if that professional help is needed. But exercise hits a lot of things. You're getting out in the sunlight, fresh air, moving your body. Sunlight is a key thing for dispelling depression. Staying home with the curtains closed and in the dark, not a good space. So get outside, get some fresh air. Usually when I'm talking to people on the phone, I'm asking them to go for a walk, get a glass of water, and take some deep breaths and open up all the curtains in their house. Just something where they can start real simple. There's obviously a checklist of over 100 things. These are causes of depression that we can help to affect. There are things we can't change, like our genetics and our development when we were growing up, but our sleep patterns, all sorts of things. And so through our program, we try to help people and facilitate those lifestyle changes.
Thank you. And isn't it interesting that even the government realized this, even in the middle of lockdown, one of the requirements, one of the things that they make allowance for is that everyone is allowed to get out of their home for exercise. You're not allowed to get out for anything else, but for exercise, you're allowed to get out. Yeah, and so it is recognized that it is imperative that we have some level of activity and exercise to be able to function properly. Otherwise, and it's not just, as you mentioned, the blood flow, the circulations and everything, but even for our mental health itself, to get out in the open air makes quite a difference. And even for prisoners in prison, they have a daily routine of outside exercise, outside of their cell, outside the exercise. It is recognized that it is very, very important for us. So that's a great start. Anyone else wants to? Sylvia, you wanted to comment there?
Yeah, I wanted to add something, Andrew, and I wanted to say that amongst going outside, and you're looking at the flowers or nature or whatever, you can actually start that gratitude journaling as well, and start being grateful that you still have the opportunity to be able to go out and breathe in that air, and absorb that sunshine and all that. I was actually smiling when you were talking about getting that heart rate going, Andrew, because I live on the 11th floor. So I do a walk, and whenever I can, if I'm not too pooped out, I try and climb back up 11 flight of stairs, to get back upstairs. And believe me, that really gets the heart pumping.
Good on you, Sylvia.
Yes, Horacio, yeah.
Just to add a couple of interesting things to remember. First of all, that exercise is as powerful as an antidepressant medication in mild to moderate depression. That's a known factor. In severe depression, exercise not enough. You need
with no side effect
intervention and no side effects. But it's just as powerful as an antidepressant, and as Alan said, no side effect. And let's not forget the social factor. Yeah. Bruce Perry, the big specialist in trauma in the States, talked about social factors as being the biggest buffer, the best buffer in times of trauma. So you go through a trauma, having good supports around you, and let's admit, COVID-19 is a traumatic situation for many of us. Nothing is as powerful as having good supports, and thank God we have social media. We have what do we have?
Zoom,
Skype. We have Zoom. We have, what's the name of this? StreamYard. We have all these things that we can still keep in touch with our loved ones. And just wanted to reference a study that was done. We always compare bushfires COVID-19 bushfire, the other big event that is traumatizing more on a kind of yearly basis, almost, the Australian society. And interestingly, a team of American researchers did a follow-up study after the 2009 bushfires, after Black Saturday here in Victoria. And they looked at a cohort of 558, almost 600 survivors of those bushfires. And what that study showed is that the people that developed depression or PTSD were the ones that were lonely, didn't have support, didn't have a church community, didn't have family, didn't have work. They were just kind of isolated. People without social support are the ones that struggle. So everybody, all the literature kind of says social factors are the most protective when you go through hard times.
Okay. Now, Andrew, you touched on exercise you started, but you touched on a couple of other things as well. For example, nutrition. Now, it's a one big word. What can you break that down a little for us? What are the things in the area of nutrition that we can do to help our mental health, especially?
This is a very interesting area that you're bringing up, Elaine, because this is one of the areas that's often overlooked in a lot of mental health screenings. So what Dr. Nedley found was the benefits of a largely plant-based diet are significant because they have a variety of nutrients. The nutrients that are especially important in the area of depression and anxiety are the cornerstones, the building blocks for a lot of our neurotransmitters. So you're looking at folate, tryptophan, you're looking at omega-3 oils from plant-based sources. These are really healthy and helpful, just to name a few. He goes into several of these because one of the key hits, he calls them hits because he's looked at these causes of depression, over 100 causes, and he formulated them into 10 basic categories. So these categories have several components in them. And one of those 10 categories is nutrition. A lot of people with mental illness have a nutritional hit. And this is one of the look, I say simple ones. Nothing's really simple, feels simple when you're depressed or anxious or both. But nutrition, you can simply add some things to your diet. And then he'll talk about how to replace other things, but just adding some flaxseed, ground flaxseed, just adding some chopped tofu for that tryptophan. These are very helpful in the prerequisites to our neurotransmitters, the building blocks for those in the brain and in the nervous system.
Thank you for that. Anybody else wants to come in there? Yes.
Interestingly, mainstream medicine and psychiatry is always running behind Dr. Nedley and these pioneers, Dr. McDougall, these pioneers in healthy lifestyle. But there's so much research now about the Mediterranean diet, which is not the perfect, it's a vegetarian rather than a vegan diet. But there's so much research backing it up. So nobody can, even my, diehard old consultant psychiatrists, even they say, Mediterranean diet, everybody says it's good. Maybe we should try it. So it's coming. It's coming even with the dinosaurs in my profession.
It's catching up.
It's catching up. Just a few more comments. First of all, exercise. Any exercise is good, but most research shows that you need to achieve moderate intensity. So half an hour brisk
walking,
break a sweat, get the heart pumping 5-6 times a week. That's where the benefits really start going really high. We need rest and recreation. We need good sleep, but we also need to recharge through fun activities, reading a book, talking to our loved ones, playing a game. Rest and recreation are very important as well. And let's not forget spirituality.
Hydration was mentioned as well. Hydration.
Hydration, yeah. And just want to mention spirituality. We're Adventists quite often. In times of lockdown, a lot of people just stay at home, watch Netflix. God is kind of kicked out the room. You're busy with other things, doing a lot of other fun stuff. Let's not forget that this is a vulnerable time, and let's not forget when David slipped, when he didn't go to war. His life was not having a normal pattern. A lot of us, when we go on holidays or during lockdowns, confined at home, that's when a lot of us kind of go into this kind of pleasure seeking, 100%, 8 hours a day, just watching TV or playing games or whatever our addiction or our hobby is. and we forget about God, and we need God so much, even more so than in our normal kind of baseline.
I'm glad you come onto this because I wanted to know, is God really, how do I ask this? Is God interested in our mental health? Is our mental health a religious matter? Is it a spiritual matter at all? How, if so, when, how? Does the Bible talk about it at all?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, Ulo actually, I hope I pronounced your name right. He actually posted earlier on in our chat, do not be anxious. That comes from Philippians 4. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer. Look at that. It's just there, let your request be made known to God. So it shows that He is a God that really understands and really wants us to actually bring our concerns to Him. So definitely, I think there's a lot more scripture verses, if you can look into every one of them, that will give us that assurance.
Okay. Yeah.
I think too there, it goes on to say that the peace of God, so that's in contrast to anxiety. We trade our anxiousness for peace. And that peace, it does something. It says there, it's a peace that surpasses all understanding, and it will guard our hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Now that's really key. Christ Jesus, when He came to this planet, one of His own mission statements was prophesied back in the Old Testament. He said, I came to preach the gospel, and one of them was to heal the brokenhearted. So for those in our community today, for those in joining us from YouTube and Facebook, if you are feeling anxious or you're feeling like your heart, like Horatio mentioned, you've gotten to that kunk and that breakdown or broken feel or sense of, I just can't get out of this. Jesus is there for that person. And this is such a revolutionary idea to many people because they viewed God, they viewed Jesus as kind of this, you do something bad and you're going to the wrong place, this kind of attitude. Jesus is actually the one who wants to heal. He wants to lift us up. He wants to, it talks about setting the captives at liberty. He's a God of freedom. And so this is why this whole lockdown doesn't have to keep us locked up. When Jesus is there and available to us, we don't have to be discouraged. We can take those discouragements to Him. He's a real being. He's a real person. He lived on this planet. Now we're going to say, well, He didn't have COVID to deal with. Well, look, I think He had some challenges on this planet, not because He was sinful or anything like that, but just it was a foreign land to Him. These antagonists and enemies. He came from heaven where He was adored and loved and appreciated, and He comes down here and He's misunderstood. He calls these 12 guys, one of them betrays him, they all flee on, what a life this guy Jesus had. And in the midst of that, He's maintaining His purpose and His mission, the reason He came. And I appreciated Ulo's Philippians text, and also the one from Psalms. A merry heart does good like a medicine. So again, our attitudes are the way we frame things. And look, I think we all have to be careful about this, particularly those of us in Victoria. We can kind of anxious and upset. Oh, another one. And look, I tell people, I wouldn't want to have to be making these decisions. I'm glad I don't have to make these decisions. This is tough decisions. And we may agree or disagree. That's not the issue. The issue is, where can we go? Where's that anchor point for us? And for many of us, we have found that anchor to be Christ. Whether we're up or down or around, He's the one that can then help our minds heal and become resilient again with that hope.
And there are so many other verses as well, Elaine. You think about, I'm thinking now about Matthew 11:28, where He says, come to me, all of you.
I've just got that here now. I'm just about to read.
Burden. So, that must be us speaking together, the Holy Spirit prompting us.
No, but that's it, isn't it? Jesus is inviting us there.
Absolutely.
In that we come to me, you who are burdened. And so many people are burdened at the moment, carrying this burden alone, and they feel lost and they feel unable to escape this heavy heaviness that they're carrying through and getting really heavy laden with this. And Jesus is inviting, come to me, and my yoke is light. That's a beautiful invitation, a beautiful request there. Some of us have been just recently studying this, and yes, Horatio.
Just would mention that let's thank God for technology, because even though we're so isolated, I've listened to some of the best sermons in my church because we had all these people invited from Avondale, from Andrews, attending our church virtually. So we are blessed by a lot of other things. So thank God we can still connect, and we have the technology. If you would have lived in 1918 when the previous big pandemic was, it was so much more difficult than today. So let's thank God.
Tonight's meeting, we're all in our home having this meeting and interacting with each other and with the whole audience out there, and this is through this platform, this medium, we are able to do this. And prior to COVID, we couldn't do this. We didn't use this. We didn't have it. We didn't use it. All our meetings was in-house. And now we are getting more accustomed and used to this, and we can. So God has provided the mechanism to help us in the time of trouble to be able to still continue to connect and to serve Him and to money. Yes, Andrew.
I just want to encourage everyone. As a Christ follower, Jesus helped us to see the primary aim or target in life. When he was asked, what's the greatest commandment? And he said, the greatest commandment is to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, that whole person concept. And I look at this as a real promise of God to us. We've talked today about some areas of our physical life, getting exercise, sunlight, these kind of things. The need to have that emotional connection with others. I've just heard a post recently on Nedley's website, his Twitter feed. He says, never leave somebody with a mental illness alone. If we replace I with we, illness becomes wellness.
Oh.
It's beautiful. I for we, illness becomes wellness. And so that whole emotional component, we're talking obviously tonight about mental health, staying focused and kind of have that purpose. And then those spiritual strategies that come into place. And I've developed a graphic that illustrates this here. It's the whole person paradigm, being physically energized, emotionally connected and available to others, mentally focused, and then spiritually aligned. And we might be thinking, wow, that's a big order. I guess my point is we don't have to look at the whole thing. God can just take us one step at a time, one or two of those areas at a time. Maybe we need to increase our recreation or our connection with others, or we need a purpose, in this topsy-turvy world. How do I stay on top and focused and going in a direction? Maybe my relationship with God hasn't been what it could be. And so I want to improve that. So rather than looking at this as like a big burden, like we were talking about a minute ago, this isn't meant to be a burden. It is meant to be a framework to think about our life. And we can choose one or two elements to start developing. A lot of us are having a lot of time at home, but we can get an interest or a focus in our life. And this can help us kind of get out of this COVID cushion and this restrictions, and just say, hey, this is an opportunity still to develop and to come closer to God. I can love Him with my whole being. And then as I'm developing in these areas, it gives me an opportunity then to love my neighbor as myself, because I know what they're going through. I've been through this, and so I can help another person. And so it's a really beautiful way to look at that great commandment of loving God with our whole being, because we are whole people. And I think a lot of times we view ourselves as machines. We're just going through the motions. Jesus wants to put life into our lives, so that we're not just machines, we're people, and He values that.
Thank you very much for that. Yes, Horatio.
I think we should finish on a positive note. But before we finish, I think it's important to also talk about how to get help if we do become clinically unwell, if we go beyond early warning stage, lifestyle intervention, when we need professional help. And I guess the main things I would look at, first of all, is functional impairment, if you're unable to go to work, unable to do the usual things because you're profoundly depressed, you're like weak at end, just sad, not enjoying things, not sleeping well, if there's something clearly broken, or you're very anxious, you're terrified of going out, you're obviously not functioning well, or if you're starting having thoughts that life's not worth living, if you're having thoughts to end your life, or contemplating that, or hurting yourself in other ways, that's when you should get help. And it's okay if I talk a bit about the kind of how to access help as well?
Yeah.
So basically, remember, the first line is always your GP, unless it's a very acute emergency. If somebody's on the verge of ending his life, is acutely suicidal, then just take the person straight to emergency. Don't wait. Either call an ambulance or drive them straight to hospital. They'll be seen by a doctor and then by mental health staff and decide if they need to be admitted. If it's not acute emergency, but somebody is obviously clinically unwell, first line is to see your GP. And thank God a lot of GPs now do telehealth sessions, so you can even contact them over the phone. And the GP can do an assessment. Most of the time, they will suggest for you to see a psychologist, which would be the next line of intervention, or sometime an antidepressant might also be recommended. So that would be the second level. And then when things are very, very difficult, when you really need a lot of support, then being admitted to hospital will be like a third line of intervention. And also it's important to know some of those contact numbers. So Michael was sharing the lifeline numbers. I'll put them in the chat. There's a lifeline in case somebody's suicidal but doesn't want to share with anybody, needs help. Just call lifeline 13 11 14. And then there's a separate one for children and young people up to the age of 25, kids helpline. Again, there's a phone number you can call 24 hours. Somebody can talk to you, and particularly if it's like late at night, you don't know what to do. So there are a lot of supports available, but you need to access help. And quite often it's, as Andrew was saying, quite often the family members know this first, and they should be the ones taking their loved one to see the GP, or if it's an emergency, to straight to emergency department, to the nearest hospital.
Thank you very much, Dr. Horacio, for highlighting this. And yes, if you feel you need help, professional help, support there, you are not coping at all, please do not hesitate. Seek the help appropriate for your need there. And if you just want to chat with someone, pick up the phone, ring Lifeline, ring Helpline there. There's a number of line blue. What's it called? Name again?
Beyond Blue.
Beyond Blue, I'm looking for. So there are those, they are readily available. Call them and chat and get support there. You don't
many have even chat. You can connect and just chat with somebody.
Right.
Picking up the phone is very anxiety provoking. You can just chat with somebody.
The whole thing is, you don't need to be struggling on your own. There are plenty of resources made available. And to conclude, I want to share this. This is one of my favorite texts that I love. And Jesus talking here himself. And John 14, and many of us knows this by heart there, says, do not let your heart be troubled. Yeah. Do not let your heart be troubled. With Jesus, we do not need to be troubled with whatever the situation we're facing at the moment. We don't need. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I am going to prepare a place for you, and where I go for a place, I will come back and take you with me. Jesus is coming back. This is what we call our blessed hope. Yeah. Jesus is coming back soon, and he will take us home with him. He's preparing a place for you, for me, for each one of us tonight. Yeah. And we can look forward to this. He's coming to take us home. And Andrew mentioned we need to have a purpose, a focus. That is our ultimate purpose. We want to be there when he comes on the clouds of heaven, and we will be there to greet him, to say, yes, I've been waiting for you, Jesus. And this is the greatest hope we have. Sylvia.
Yeah, I just also wanted to share one of my favorite ones, which I have been really hanging on to, and that's on Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Amen. So, this is something that we hold on and believe, that it doesn't need to, that we don't need to be doing whatever it is on our own.
Thank you very much indeed for sharing that. Any last word? And because our time is going, but
yeah, I can see it's 9:01.
Yeah.
I'll stand on Proverbs 12:25, Elaine. Anxiety in the heart of man causes depression, but a good word makes it glad.
Amen.
So give those good words to yourself.
Amen.
Keep an eye on that self-talk, but also give that good word to someone else. Proverbs 12:25.
In Dr. Nedley's vocabulary, get rid of those distorted thoughts.
Oh, that's a whole nother topic. We should have a night on that one, Elaine. We should. A whole nother Friday. We could go through all sorts of stuff on CBT. I had all the books here, but we just ran out of time.
All right. Did you want the last word, Horacio? Everyone else has.
I'm actually working on a sermon because recently it struck me how much advice there is in the Bible about not worrying. And if you do a search for worry or worrying, there's so many things. Looks like worrying and being strong. These are two of the things that God told us so often in Old Testament, New Testament time. So there's so much material. I think it's good to memorize, pick up some of these verses that really talk to our hearts. And when we go through a slump, through a tough time, bring those to our memory and get encouragement.
Do not worry what you will eat tomorrow, what you eat. And beautiful text again there. Okay, thank you very much for your contribution this evening. Thank you for coming on very short notice and coming on and supporting the discussion and facilitating. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for joining us, all of you on the platform. Your suggestion, your contribution, your comments. We thank you, and we look forward to having you here again next Friday, same place, same time. Thank you. Have a great evening. Have a good rest, and happy Sabbath to you all. Thank you.
Happy Sabbath.
Thank you.